Hi guys, welcome to Vesna TV. This will be a really long mega video. It is my very best of 2021 Dollar Tree DIYs. So I really hope that you enjoy it and let's get going.
So I'm going to be showing you how you can make a noodle board using pretty much all Dollar Tree supplies. What you will need are 5 signs from the Dollar Tree, the long ones. They have the love ones for Valentine's Day. These are for St. Patty's Day. This is what they had, so I picked it up. And you need 5 of them. I needed them to be 24 inches long, and that's what you want. And you need 5 of them for a stove that's 30 inches wide. Then you need these other pieces. These are signs, also from the Dollar Tree. Now I found these in the home decor aisle, and they're not quite 24 inches long. They're a little bit less. They're about 20 inches long, and they're thicker pieces of wood is basically what they are. And I've seen love ones before. These are the ones that they had right now, so I bought these ones, and you'll need 2 of those. And then you'll also need the giant popsicle sticks or craft sticks, whatever you want to call them. I only found the colorful ones, so you only need 1 pack and you won't need all of them, but you can do any kind. You just need a pack of them. And it really depends whether you'll use the whole pack or not, depending on how wide your stove is and how many you put on. You'll see how many I used for my size of piece, and then you can kind of judge what you need. And then you also need paint and some handles. The handles are the only things that I couldn't find at the Dollar Tree. I had these ones. They may have them at the Dollar Tree. I've never actually looked. I had these ones on hand from a dresser that I redid, so I thought they would be fine for this project. You can probably pick them up for about $1 a piece. I've seen them at Home Depot, just any kind of handles. They could be plastic, metal, whatever. And I'm just spray painting them in a matte black. So for the white paint, I'm using the Rust-Oleum Chalked Linen White Paint. And again, you could probably use acrylic paint if you wanted. I just, like I've said in previous videos, I always have a giant can of this paint because I use it a lot. So I'm going to be painting that out with that. And I'm removing the little metal clover leaves, and I'm going to be keeping that for maybe a St. Patty's Day DIY. I was going to paint this side of the sign, but then I decided, because it was ripping off quite a bit of the cardboard, that I didn't want to, I wanted it to be more even, so I painted the other side of this. And I will be filling, so you will need this as well. I'm going to be filling the little holes with some wood filler. And whenever I paint in my chalk paint, again, don't worry about brush strokes because you can get rid of them easily with a little bit of sanding, and make sure you're just going in all sorts of directions. So I wound up doing 2 coats of this, and I did, like I said, sand in between coats, and I just used any sandpaper I had on hand, and I just very, very lightly sanded it down just to give it a bit of a smoother finish. So I'm not going to show you painting the second coat because I don't think it's necessary, but I just do want to show you how I sanded it. It was, like I said, very, very light. I tried using this little sander, and then I didn't like the way it was working, so I just used some sandpaper, again from the Dollar Tree, and I lightly sanded it down and put on another coat of the white paint. And then I went ahead and I did the same thing with the little longer wood signs, the green ones. And I painted these guys out twice just to get a nice coverage, sanded in between, and waited them to fully dry. And with the chalk paint, it doesn't take too long, maybe a couple hours, so they were ready to go. You just want to make sure that you apply a light coat and then another coat rather than trying to cake on too much. Otherwise, you'll get it won't look nicely finished. So you know, less is more, as I always say. Now, you know that I've made a noodle board before. If you watched any of my videos, you might have seen it. I made one where I used actual wood and I stained it, and it was from the Home Depot, all of the stuff. It cost about the same amount to make it that way, but you do need power tools and involves a little bit more work. So I wanted to show you something that's a little bit maybe easier to do, especially if you can't get to Home Depot or you don't have a way to bring those things home. So, you know, this kind of gives you another option, but I'll link the video in here and I'll link it at the end as well, so you can check out that video too. So I'm just using some wood filler to fill in these holes. and then I just kind of push it in and I flatten it out. I didn't need to sand or fix it up or anything. I did a pretty good job pushing it in and evening it out, but you could if you needed to. I tend to not like doing stuff like this because I find that it's just not as perfect as I want it to be, but I was pretty satisfied with this, and I don't even notice it when it's on the stove, so I guess I did a good job. So then once you do that, then you want to connect these boards together. Now you could do all sorts of different things. For this, I'm showing you how to do it with the giant popsicle sticks, but you could also even glue down another, if you bought another 2 signs, you could glue them down on the back. That'll make it that much stronger. The stove where I'm keeping it, I'm not going to be removing it all the time. It's an extra stove that I use when I'm cooking something stinky, or if I have company coming, not that we have any company coming now, but or if I'm making a big dinner or something for us where I need more than 4 burners, I guess. But it is still fairly stable. But like I said, you could, if you're going to be moving it, 10, 15 times a day, then you might want to add different things on the back. But these will keep them really, really sturdy. The only thing is, it's just because it's a big board, that's why I'm saying you might want to do more. So I'm adding E6000 and hot glue. I'm doing both onto these, and I am gluing them where the crease is. And I'm going to be doing that for all of them, and I do 2 of those popsicle sticks so it covers the entire length. And then I also do one down the middle crossways. That way it just reinforces it a little bit. And the reason I'm using the hot glue and the E6000 is because I want to make sure that it takes hold right away, so I don't have to leave it 24 hours. But I'm also I will be leaving it to set a little bit, and I'm going to put something heavy on top so that way I can ensure that it has a nice, good hold. And I just put some heavy books and some heavy wood on top, and I leave it for a couple of hours to set. And when I come back, it's nice and set, and I'm not concerned about it falling apart. So when I come back, I go ahead and I pre-drill some holes into the other side of my board to leave a place where I'm going to screw in the handles. You could hot glue everything. I screwed it in because I wanted a better hold. But you could use a combination of wood glue or E6000 and hot glue. But I figured a screw would be perfect for this. So I'm just pre-drilling the holes on the actual noodle board and on those green signs that I painted, those green pieces of wood. Now the handles I showed you are these, and I did wind up painting them black so they look really nice now. And I'm just trying to measure out where exactly I want them. I'm putting them in the middle of the small sign board, like the little board that I bought, the green one. And what I'm doing is I'm measuring how long the handle is, where the little holes go, and then I'm leaving each like an equal amount of space from the top and bottom so that it's right in the middle. And I mark it off, and then I drill my holes. So just make sure you carefully measure where exactly you want to go and double check it twice, because once you drill that hole, then there is going back. You can always put wood filler, but I just find why do that to yourself if you don't have to. So once that's done, then I go ahead, I pre-drill everything, get it all ready, and then I put my handles in, and then I drill, then I mark off again where I want this smaller piece of wood to go with the handle. And again, it's just right in the middle of the noodle board on the sides, like in the middle. So I'm leaving the same amount from the top, same amount from the bottom, and then I'm drilling that part down too. Again, you could hot glue / E6000 this, but I wanted to drill it to screw it in to make sure that it has a nice hold. And I just have a cheap Black & Decker drill. I don't have anything fancy. Now, when you go to screw in the actual wood part to the board, you may want to have someone help you just hold it. So what I did was I kind of let the board hang off the side of my table and I screwed from underneath. And so my husband helped me with that, because if you try to hold the board up with one hand and try to screw it, like it's very awkward. And because the board is so long and thin, you risk of maybe like warping it a little bit, and you don't want to do that. So just have it hang off a little bit on the side of your table or wherever you're screwing, and just screw it in from the bottom. So once that was done, I used my Cricut to cut out this S and put EST as an established in 2008, and that is when my husband and I got married. So I cut this out just on some gray permanent vinyl. I used the Easy November script, and I just made a capital S, and then I found this cute little free SVG of the circle border around, and I measured where I wanted it to go on the board, again in the middle, from the sides and from the top and bottom, and I put it on the sign. And then I wanted the sign to look a little bit rustic, so what I did was I added some of the country gray from Rust-Oleum chalked paint, and I dry brushed it onto the sign to make it look like it's a little bit distressed. So if you don't know what dry brushing is, it's when you take a little bit of paint and you wipe the excess off on a rag or a paper towel, and then you just brush what was left on the paintbrush. And I just did it in random spots, but just making sure that I was going up and down, not side to side. And if I put too much on, I just rubbed it off with a little bit of a paper towel. And that's it. And if you put too much on, you can always go back over with the white paint. No big deal. Here it is all finished on my stove. I love the way it turned out. It's beautiful. It covers the ugly stove because it's not a very nice stove, and it just looks perfect in the little kitchen. I love it. I am going to show you how I used all Dollar Tree items to create a 3-tiered bin shelf. So all you need are these few supplies. So you need a welcome sign, one of these hangers from the Dollar Tree, and 3 vertical gift boxes. You can choose any kind of welcome or home sign or love sign, whatever you have on hand or whatever your Dollar Tree has on hand at this time. Same with the gift boxes. I happen to have Christmas ones, and the only reason I have them is because I got them in the clearance section at our Dollar Tree. They were 50% off. They are the smaller kind. We don't have bigger kinds, or at least I haven't seen them here in Canada, but maybe we do. So you'll need 3 of these boxes, 1 of these hangers, and a welcome sign if you wanted to make this all truly Dollar Tree.
I wound up getting rid of that Happy Easter sign as it didn't work.
So before we paint, we will need to prep these boxes. Now the boxes themselves need to be painted on the inside, so I thought a spray paint will be the easiest, and I'm just using a Rona brand white spray paint. It's the one that I had on hand. You could use anything. You could use acrylic paint if you wanted as well, or you could use a chalk spray paint or chalk paint, whichever. I just thought for the base coat, the white, just to get everything covered, it would be easiest if I did a spray paint, especially since I wanted the inside sprayed as well. So then we need to cut these boxes. So the boxes are roughly 6 inches long, and at about 2 inches, I'm just going to make a mark, and then I'm going to put a diagonal line from the very top to the 2-inch mark, and this will give me a measurement of where I need to cut for the opening of the box, because I do want them to have that kind of opening. And I do this on both sides for each of the boxes, and then I just use an X-Acto knife to cut these. You could use any tool that you prefer for cutting kind of cardboard type of stuff. I thought the X-Acto knife was the best way to go for me. But again, you use whatever you need to use. Just make sure you're careful with whichever tool you're using so you do not cut yourself. And then once I made the side marks, then I put a little mark at the front, and then I just drew a line right across so that I could make sure that I'm cutting evenly from side to side. And that's it. So like I said, I used my X-Acto knife and I cut them, and I did this for each of the boxes. I'll show you the one box and then I'll show you what they look like cut. So the boxes are cardboard. They are thicker cardboard, but you do want to make sure that you're not squeezing them too hard, that you flatten the box, or when you're cutting that you're not ripping off too much of the whatever that covering is, the picture. You could rip it all off if you wanted to. It'll just give an uneven look to the box. So you want to be careful. I did have a few spots where it kind of came off. I didn't bother fixing them with any putty or anything like that. Sometimes I do, but I did not bother this time, mainly because I did want that rustic enamel look to this piece. If you've watched any of my other videos, you know that I love the rustic look and I love the perfectly imperfect look. I am very much a fan of things not looking quite perfect because that's the way life is, I think. Anyway, life is kind of throws you curveballs, and the most beautiful things are not often perfect. Even in nature, when you look at things, they're not always perfect. So I kind of bring this into my home. So once you cut this off, you want to sand it down. Any of the paper that's kind of sticking up, you want to sand down or cut it off just to get a nice smooth edge there so it doesn't look too papery and cut up. And then you're ready to paint. So I did not film myself spray painting these, but once I cut all three of them up, I wound up spray painting them in that white color, and then I need to do more touch-ups with them because that spray paint is quite shiny. So another thing, if you didn't want this step and you wanted kind of that matte finish, is you could use a chalked spray paint. They are a little bit pricier, so this way for me works better, but whatever you want is what you do, obviously. So anyway, here's what they look like all spray painted. And then what I did was I actually went ahead and then I needed to repaint them again. So what I was doing, I was adding some chalked linen white to the boxes, and this I did with just to kind of go over top of where the spray paint didn't quite get, where it didn't cover as much as I wanted to, and to get rid of, like I said, that shininess because it was just a little bit too shiny, which I knew it would be because the spray paint that I was using was not a matte finish spray paint. But it was easier for me to do it this way than to try and paint the whole piece, and then it would have been harder to do it this way. So this way I spray painted as much as I wanted to and could and had the time. And I also didn't want to soak them too much because they are cardboard, so you don't want to soak them so much that they kind of disintegrate or fall apart. So anyway, I went over top of all of them with the chalked linen white, and then once I did that, I went ahead and I sanded it down where there was pieces that were kind of sticking up, where they were just I imperfect, or where the paint kind of gunked up too much. And I also find by sanding down just gently, you're actually adding a nicer, smoother, but still matte finish to that chalk paint. I do that with furniture all the time, and it turns out really nice. Once I had them sanded down, I went ahead and I applied the enameling process or the look. So what I did was I actually used just black acrylic paint and just a thinner brush. I didn't use a fine tip brush. I don't have a lot of luck with those. I don't think I have very good quality ones, so they kind of aren't stiff enough, I guess, and then they kind of go all over the place. So I just used a little bit of a thicker brush, but thin enough that it did the trick. And I just applied it to the edges, like all around the edges and any corners and on the inside. And then I just put little nicks kind of all throughout the piece to give it the look of kind of like an aged, dinged up enamel. Love the rustic look. So these turned out really nicely. So if you're going to be using this for mail or anything that will have more traffic to it, I suggest you apply either one of the waxes, either an Annie Sloan wax or the Rust-Oleum protective glaze, or even Mod Podge to these, just to give them a thicker coating and protective coating so that you don't chip any of the paint off by accident. But if you're going to be using it like myself just as a decorative piece, you don't need to do any of that. Once I have these made to perfection, as I like to think, I go ahead and I work on that hanger. So with this hanger, what you need to do is just use some really strong wire cutters. I think these ones weren't quite strong enough, but they did the trick. I just had to push really hard. And you're going to be cutting them into 3 sections. And then whatever piece is left over, you will be cutting that off. So I'll show you what I mean by that. As you can see, I was having a little bit of a hard time, but once I got it going, then I just kind of broke it off and cut off where I needed to. Try to do it as close as you can to the edge, because it will be harder to remove a smaller piece than it is a bigger piece. You can always sand it down and kind of cut it down with some thinner shears or whatnot, or wire cutters, but try to get as close as you can to the edge. And then you remove these sides, and then you do repeat that for the whole hook or hanger. And then for the last piece that has the extra little hanging part, what you're going to do is just cut that off as well. And that one is a little bit thicker, so you're going to start the cut and then you can kind of wiggle it off, and then you just finish them off by sanding them. So once I completed cutting all of them and breaking them off, I went ahead and I added that whole enamel look to them like I did with the bins. If you're curious where I got this idea, I will send a shout out to another YouTuber that I actually saw on Facebook. She had posted this, that she created this. Hers was a Kirkland's dupe. So kind of similar to mine. Some things were identical. She did not use all Dollar Tree products. I wanted mine to be a Dollar Tree, strictly Dollar Tree product one, minus the paints and the wax. But she's called She's So Crafty D. If you haven't checked her out, check her out. She made a version of this bigger, because I think you guys in the States, I think she is in the States, have bigger Dollar Tree boxes than we do here in Canada, but that's where my inspiration came from, and I just did my own twist to it. So anyway, I added the enameling with the black acrylic paint, and I had to fix some up with a hot glue gun, because as I was kind of cutting those pieces that were hanging off, I broke some of the pieces. So once everything dried, I had to go ahead and I attach these hooks to the back of the box. I was going to use a combination of Weld Bond and hot glue, but then I just wound up switching to just the hot glue gun and just making sure that I added a lot of hot glue to it, and it should hold it for quite a long time. And I'm just adding the hooks to the box, and I'm making sure that I've marked off where I want the hooks to sit. This all depends on how you want yours to sit, but I measured off that I wanted them to sit. So I'm just putting a little dot to where I want this to sit, and it is 100 millimeters down, and then I'm leaving 15 millimeters from each side, and that's where I'm positioning. So I just put the 2 dots at that level, like I kind of do 3 dots all together. You could even draw a light line if you wanted to, but this is the measurement that I wanted because of the kind of materials I was using. If you use something different, just kind of measure out how you want those baskets to sit. I do wind up adding these clips to hold the hooks onto the box while the hot glue is adhering them. And I repeat for all 3 boxes. And like I said, I did use the Weld Bond, but it wasn't doing the trick, so I wound up just using mostly hot glue. You could do a combination if you wanted to make sure that it has even a better hold. I just kind of gave up on the idea because I didn't think it was doing anything. And sometimes when I try to use a combination of the hot glue and a different glue, it doesn't work out for me. So this is what I chose to do, and it worked out pretty well. So while those are kind of curing, you can move on to actually building your frame for the bins. So remember this welcome sign? Well, I wound up taking that clover off of it because I can use it next year or down the road for another project. And then I cut it into 3. Now again, I did not record myself because I used some of the power tools, and they are in our workshop room, which has poor lighting, and right now it's such a mess that you literally just can just walk through and do what you need to do and come out. I need to get rid of some baby things that I haven't been able to get rid of yet because of COVID and whatnot. We can't really, it's not, our thrift stores keep on closing and opening, so it's a little bit more difficult right now. So I'm just waiting for the summer. So then I will, once these were cut up, I wanted them to look like wood. So I saw another YouTuber from the Mug Life. She used this tool, this wood grain tool, which I had never seen before. I don't know how maybe I have, but I didn't pay attention. But anyway, she used a wood grain tool. I'll show you what it looks like to do one of her furniture pieces, and I thought, wow, what a great idea. So then I kind of did a little bit of research on this tool and saw that you can use it on all sorts of things. So I got really excited and I ordered it off of Amazon, and I ordered a little while back, so I hadn't used it, but I thought this would be the perfect project to use it because it would give me that wood look. So I did see people use all sorts of different things to do the glaze, like to have that look, like they use stain and whatnot. So I wanted to use my Rust-Oleum decorative glaze in Java. Again, if you've watched my other videos, you see that I use this decorative glaze quite a bit. I use this and the Annie Sloan wax quite a bit, but the decorative glaze works really well for this because it is kind of like a stain. It's quite liquidy. So after I prepped these and sanded them down so that they wouldn't have any things hanging off, I went ahead to apply the wood grain look. I start off by just applying some of the decorative glaze, and I kind of play around with what I use to apply it. I use between a rag and this sponge, I kind of do a little bit of both, and I just apply a little bit of a heavier coat so I don't wipe off too much. So that way there's a little bit on top. You could use just a regular brush for painting. I didn't want to because the stain kind of wrecks them, so I didn't want to use that. So I used just this little brush that I had here. And then you take your tool, and what you want to do, you kind of want to rock it back and forth. And whenever, so if you pull straight and then rock, it gives a different grain look. And you kind of do that until you achieve the look that you're looking for. I didn't bother priming this or painting it or anything like that. I did see videos where they did that, but to me, I wanted to see what the easiest way to do this was and whether it would give me the look. I was going to try it, and then if it didn't work, I was going to paint it, but I love the way this looked. I just think that it gave such a nice, like deep wood kind of look that I was looking for, and really easy. And I know, like, these are some sort of chipboard or something, these welcome signs. They're not wood. So amazing. I love the way this turned out. And I did that with with all of the pieces. So again, I cut the board into 3. The 2 longer pieces were my side pieces, and then the middle pieces, the middle part of the board I cut into 4 pieces. So those are the parts that are going to hold my little shelf together. And the length of the board itself was 24 inches. So each of the pieces was 6 inches long. And in case you guys were just wondering how I cut these pieces and how I got these pieces, I will go more into depth over the measurements in the next part after I finish painting them or staining them, because I want to kind of give you the measurements that I used. Of course, depending on what you use, where you are, how long your boards are, if you're using all Dollar Tree materials, it'll all depend. You may not have these measurements that I had, but at least it gives you an idea of where, if you know what size my bins were and how long my board was, then you can kind of scale it to what you're making. So again, when you're doing when you're using the tool, the more you rock back and forth, the more of a grainy look it'll have. So you want to kind of go straight, rock it a little bit, straight, rock it a little bit, and so on until you achieve the look that you want. And if it's not working out, you can add more stain and do it again. Just like with paint, it's very forgiving. Once I got the look I was going for and these boards had a little bit of time to dry, I went ahead and I just added a little bit of the glaze to the sides of the boards so that way you wouldn't see the lighter coloring of the chipboard. And again, I use that little brush to apply it, and then I chuck that brush, but actually I just take the top part off and I keep the little round dowel part because I can use it for other projects. So this took me a little while to kind of measure out and see how I wanted it to be. So basically what I did was I put these little pieces on the boards. I didn't, because I had to leave enough space for the bin to actually be able to hang. And I wanted to use it from this one board. You could obviously use two boards and have it be a little bit wider. Up to you, whatever you want it to kind of look like. I wanted this look. I wanted it to be a little bit smaller and kind of tight fitting. So I left 20 millimeters from each side, and that's where I put the ends of my little small piece, if that makes sense. So I just did the very first piece. I made sure that it was nice and square. I hot glued it and was going to use wood glue and then switch to weld bond. So I did both and I glued them down that way. Then I clipped it again with those clips and I let it cure, and I did the same thing for the bottom part, and I put the boards right up at the top so that way I didn't have to worry about measuring down. So just right up at the bottom and right up at the top, and then I let that cure, and then I just left 6 inches from the bottom of the top small piece. I left 6 inches, then I put my new piece, then I left another 6 inches, and then I put my new piece. There's a little bit less room on the bottom one, but that's okay because I wanted the bin to kind of overlap the bottom piece as well. So you'll see it looks symmetrical, but 6 inches between the 3 pieces from the top, and that should get you what you want. Again, you can do your own measurements depending on how tight you want them to each other, how much space you want at the bottom. It's totally up to you. This is what I wanted, and I loved the way it turned out. So here it is all glued down. I wound up, like I said, using hot glue, and I tried wood glue with these pieces. We'll see how it works out. If it doesn't stick, or if you guys want a bit of a tighter fit, you could always use really small screws and screw in the pieces to the larger pieces. Again, I'm using it for floors. It'll be a decorative piece, so I don't need that super secure hold, but you totally could do it if you wanted to. So finally, here is the finished piece. I absolutely love the way it turned out. I am creating something really cool. So to start off, these are the materials that I will be using to create this. This is the inspiration, and this is my friend's picture. She had picked it up and purchased it at Dublin Mercantile, which is a store just about an hour and a half away from here. They have very like rustic kind of decor pieces. And then unfortunately they don't have a website, but they do have an Instagram page. They might have created something for you to buy online now because they have to be closed because of the lockdown. But this is their Christmas truck that they have on their Instagram page, which goes for about $70. So the truck itself goes for 70 and the tree for 26. So it's quite pricey. It is like a steel truck, so probably worth the cost, but it was a little bit out of my budget, so I decided to create my own using Dollar Tree supplies. So what you will need are 2 of these wooden trucks from the Dollar Tree. Now you could use the Easter or Christmas themed ones if you have them. And then one of the crates from the Dollar Tree. And then I will be using the white paint, the black acrylic paint, and this Pacific blue acrylic paint, and a pewter from Apple Barrel, as well as a silver acrylic paint. All of them are from this dollar store except for the Apple Barrel one. I had picked that up at Walmart. They were all $1 anyway. I always have these paints on hand, so I will be using these to create the galvanized look. Then at the end, which I didn't show here because I wasn't sure if I was going to use it, I do use a couple more paints just to create like a copper look. If you have a copper paint, you can use that. I did have some copper paint, but it dried out, so I had to make my own. Start off by just removing everything from here, and then like the tags and everything, and then the price tags at the back, not the price tag, the little sticker tags. And then I also go ahead and I remove the pieces, the wood pieces from one of the trucks, because when you put it together, you kind of have to flip over the other one to make it like a 3-dimensional truck. So I'm removing the tires, the little rims, and the tires, as well as the little crate, the wagon crate piece at the top. So I sort of use a few things. I use the scraper to get the sticker completely off, and then, not the scraper, scraper. And then I also use the scraper to get some of the tire pieces off. Some of them came off easier than the others. I wind up using one of my Cricut tools. Sandra from the Schwann's Nest gave me this tip. She said that she had used this for the truck when she was removing it. And I used that little spatula thing to remove the rest of them. I just didn't want to, it was quite glued on there, so I didn't want to break my tool. So most of it came off. It was just this little tire piece that I had some trouble with. I wound up breaking it a little bit, but I glued it back together and you can't even tell. So I do this on both of the trucks, and then I go ahead and I assemble my other truck. And I try to, before I glue it on, I'm just matching the pieces to the right side, and then I just hot glue them on. And like I said, I did break that little part of the tire, so I have to kind of put it back together. And the pieces that I didn't use are the pieces that I used to glue on the back of that little hole when I was filling it in. I like to reuse everything. So again, I just use my hot glue to put this on. You could use any other glue that you wanted. Hot glue sticks really fast and it does a good job. I'm not going to be moving this around too much. And if it does eventually fall off, I can always hot glue it back on. But you could use wood glue and combination of wood glue and hot glue if you wanted the immediate hold but a permanent hold. I just didn't think it was necessary for this piece. And so once it's all glued on, I go ahead and I paint it in that same color, give it a nice good coat, and then I go ahead and I galvanize. For the galvanizing, I go ahead and I use the silver metallic paint, a white acrylic paint, the pewter, some black, and some of this Pacific blue. And then I just use one of these little sponge brushes from the Dollar Tree, and I just kind of dab until I get the look, add a little bit more black, then I add a little bit more of the silver. I kind of do the silver near the end so it gives that shiny effect. And then I just kind of keep on going until I achieve the look that I want. This is really kind of like a dab, 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 a little bit of this, a little bit of that until you get the look that you're going for. And you keep on doing that. And I did this several times. As you can see, I'm kind of dab, 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 dab. And I paint the tires just in black, but I do that at the end. The blue, I just add a little bit because in my eyes, when I see something galvanized, I see just a hint of blue. So if you don't have to add this, you can and you don't have to. I like the look that it gives. And then that's all there is to that. Once I finish painting the tires, I go and I move on to the other side of the truck. And then for the crate, I use just a little bit of espresso brown mixed together with the black because I just put it in the same little container. And that gives me, like I said, that look that I'm going for. And I just do this with both sides of the truck until I get the look that I'm going for. And then, as I said, at the end, I add a little bit of the copper effect so it looks like it's rusty because I wanted this truck to really look like it's aged. So I also painted the part of the crate in that black and brown mix, and I also painted the inside of the crate in the black and brown mix. And then I just glued that crate to the back here, and I glued it as close to the edge as I could, so that way it looked like it was a part of the truck. So once I glued that on, I went ahead to assemble the front of the truck. Now, I'm using hot glue again. You could use a combination of hot glue and wood glue, but I found that the hot glue sticks pretty well right now. It may, like I said, down the road give, and then I'll fix it, but for right now it works well. For the front of the truck, I am using some of the jumbo popsicle sticks or craft sticks, and I am just kind of I cut them to size to the width of the truck that I need them, and I use my handheld miter shears to do that. And then once I cut those, then I just kind of glue them on as I see fit. You'll see I changed something a little bit near the end, and I'll explain that a bit later. So again, guys, thank you so much for watching my channel. I really do appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. You can find all sorts of home decor items on my channel. They're all created on a budget, usually using Dollar Tree supplies or trash to treasure items and even thrifted items. And I also do lots of furniture flips. So if you like that kind of stuff, make sure you hit the subscribe button, notification bell, and let me know that you subscribed, or just stop by and say hello. Now, this video is a part of a challenge. It's hosted by Domestic Diva. If you don't know Sonia, she's my sister, so I know her very well. But she's an awesome creator. She hosts these challenges monthly. If you haven't checked her out, she's amazing. She's got, actually now, she's up to 4 channels. Crazy woman, but she loves doing this. So she's got a new channel. It's called Life with Dee Dee. Make sure you check it out. It's her vlog channel, so you get to see lots of her and her daily routine in her life. So make sure you check her out. She is super creative. This is her DIY channel that she's doing it on, so Domestic Diva DIY. Check her out. Give her a big shout out. Tell her that I sent you, and subscribe. And check out the playlist where there'll be lots and lots of different creators doing the Look for Less challenge. So before I glue the craft sticks down, I just want to kind of make sure that they are the length that I need them to be. And then I just start at the very end. And this one I kind of glued half on the crate, half on the truck. And then the rest of them I continue on. I wound up gluing them on the windshield. And then you'll see that I have removed them because I wanted the window shield, like the windshield part, to be open. On the very front, because I had a little piece of these square little pieces of wood that I got at the Dollar Tree or the Dollarama, I'm not sure, one of the stores. They were like not square, they were rectangle pieces of really thin wood, and I had cut one up for a different project, so I just used that at the front of the truck. You can't see it because the angle is kind of awkward, but I'll show you what that one looks like after. And I put that just at the front. And then I add like a little bumper with the jumbo craft stick, and then I paint everything the same pewter, and then I go ahead and galvanize it like I did the rest of the truck. with leaving the bumper part a little bit of a different color than the rest of the truck. So once I've galvanized that, I then go ahead and I remove that windshield like I said I would. I just didn't record that. I just gently used an X-Acto knife to cut out the glue. And then I used these 3 colors to get that copper color that I wanted. And I just kind of attach it to the rims, to the door, to the like around the window, just all the edges to make it look like there's rust on the truck. And that is all there is to this guy. I am so excited to be using him in my decor. I love the way he turned out. Let me know what you think. I've decorated him with some flowers, but this is great because you'll be able to, if you create this, and I will be using this in all of my decor. Fall, spring, Easter, summer, Christmas. I'm so happy to have created this guy. Another enamel rustic farmhouse type of DIY, all using Dollar Tree items. So stay tuned to see what I've created. This is a very inexpensive and easy DIY. You need 3 things and some paint and glue. You need a pot, this garden dish from the Dollar Tree, and one of the cubes from the set of 4 cubes that you can get at the Dollar Tree. If you can't find that cube, you can use one of the tumble tower wood blocks or anything that's just a little bit raised. I thought this was perfect. So you could even use one of the Rubik's cubes that they haven't just painted out, but I found these, so I used this one. I thought that was perfect. And what I'm doing is I'm just sanding down this little planter just to get it to be a little bit rough so the paint can stick better. I'm using the Rust-Oleum Chocolate and White paint because I love using this paint on all of my projects. Basically, I buy that big pail and it goes a really long way. You could use acrylic paint, of course, if you wanted to, or any paint that you have on hand, but this is the paint that I chose, and I think it really gives that farmhouse look. So I'm just going to go ahead and paint this. I give it 2 coats, and in between the coats, I do a light sanding, and I paint the inside and outside of the plastic plate. Now, if you can't find these garden dishes, although they have them all year long, you could use a clear plastic plate, a glass plate, really anything that is raised a little bit on the edges. It's up to you what you can find, but this is really easy to find at all times at the Dollar Tree, so I thought this was perfect. So I paint all of these white, I give them 2 coats, and I do a light sanding in between. So I'll just show you how I do that. And for the sandpaper, honestly, just use whatever you have on hand. Just as long as you do a really light coat. It doesn't really matter which sandpaper you use. Just do a really light coat and it'll do the job. And then do your other coat of paint. After I finished adding the second coat and it was all nice and dry, I went ahead and I used some black acrylic paint, and this is my favorite part. I added the enamel look and the little rustic looks where it looks like the scale is a little bit dinged up. And then I always use these little egg carton containers for my paints. And then I just add the black to all of the edges and corners of this piece, and then a little bit on the actual piece itself, like I said, just to give it a little bit of a dinged up look. And I do this on the planter, the plate, and the cube. Once I get that painted, I go ahead and I glue on this cube to the pot. Now, initially I didn't measure it, and then I wound up just measuring kind of how big the cube was and I marked off where the cube would go, and like I found the center basically for the cube. This you'll just have to figure out yourself. I had about 30 millimeters between on each side to make sure, and then I just kind of marked off where the cube should go, and that's about it. And then I just use some hot glue to glue it down. If you wanted a more permanent hold, you could do a combination of a permanent glue and the hot glue. I find that for decor pieces, usually it winds up sticking pretty well. If it does fall apart, I can always just add more glue, but I've got some really nice glue with my new glue gun that seems to work really well. And I glue this down, and then I go ahead and I glue the faceplate on. So for this next, for the face of the scale, you're going to want to print off a face. I found this free printable online. I'll just link the website down below. And I printed it off, and now I'm just cutting it out. Well, I've cut it out, and then I put it on black cardstock just to give it a little bit of a harder backing. You could also use foam board if you had it. And then that's prepared, and I just glued it down with double-sided tape. For the faceplate, I wound up using just one of these little cubes from the Dollar Tree. They came in a pack of a whole bunch of mini cubes like this. And I am using this just to put the faceplate a little bit away from the planter. You can use anything, like any scrap piece of wood, even if you had like a little piece of popsicle stick and you just cut it into a few smaller pieces, glue them together. Anything you have on hand, you can use for this. This is what I had on hand, so I use this. And then I painted it in black. And so same thing for the faceplate. I wind up measuring where the center will be and I mark it off. It just depends what size of planter you get or what you use for your base of where you're going to position it. I just kind of didn't want it to be too low or too high, and I wanted it a little bit in the center, but I wound up moving it a bit just because of I didn't want it sitting in the little lip of the planter. I then just use hot glue to attach the faceplate to the little piece of wood and the little piece of wood to the planter, and I just do some touch-ups. I also put a little bit of black around that faceplate to give that a look of the enamel look as well. So it looks like it's being kind of held together in like a metal piece around the glass. That's kind of the look I was going for. And then I just go ahead and I used hot glue to glue on the plate of the scale. So I just kind of put glue right in the middle and I centered it, and that's where I put the plate. I did not measure this. I just kind of eyeballed it, and I think I did a pretty good job. And that's all there is to this project. Really, really easy, very inexpensive, but really easy to make. And I don't know about you guys, but I absolutely love the way this turned out. It's going to look really great in my kitchen. I'm going to actually keep it on a tray on my kitchen table with some other decor pieces. Creating 2 Dollar Tree DIYs using the Dollar Tree foam dice. So both DIYs will be using these dice, and for the first one, actually for both, I will need to paint them in white. I'm giving them that rustic farmhouse look, so they'll all be painted white. I actually wound up taking 2 away. I didn't wind up using 2 of these, but I painted them anyway. And to paint them, I am using the Rust-Oleum Chalked Linen White paint. And I'm using actually the Annie Sloan brush. You don't have to use that. I'm just using it now. I really like the way that brush paints. It's one of the best brushes I have. So if you are interested, it's worth the investment. I've been using it for several years. As long as you take care of it, it lasts. These dice do come 4 in a pack, so it's a really affordable DIY. So I do have to put 2 coats of the paint on because the especially the red and the green a little bit too, but the red especially kind of seeps through. So you just want to do 2 coats so it covers it nicely. You don't have to worry about the bottom parts to do 2 coats, but at least the parts that are going to be visible. So then to make them a little bit rustic and more farmhouse, I am adding this black acrylic paint. I'm just dry brushing it around the corners. I guess it's giving that enamel look too, but I really like this kind of distressed look. So just dry brushing some spots a little bit more, some spots a little bit less to give me the look that I want. So for this first DIY, I do need 9 of these blocks, and I will be making a tic-tac-toe board. If you have a stencil this size, or if you have a Cricut, you can use your Cricut to write the XOXO. I'm just writing it in with a Sharpie. Again, because I'm going for that rustic look, I'm okay with them looking a little bit imperfect. It kind of gives that childhood vibe to it, but then also that rustic vibe. So I just wind up writing the XOXO on all of them, and actually what I do is I just do XOXOXO so that I don't make too many of one. Once those are done, I go ahead and I make the little box for the XOXO, and I use these garden picks it's from Dollarama. I've seen them at the Dollar Tree as well. They are $1.25 per pack of them, and I wind up just making the frame around the box, and then I add just X's and like a cross and an X at the bottom. You'll see what I mean by that. I'm just measuring here to see how high I need it to be. So I need it to be too high, and I just cut them off just large enough so that they fit the squares. Not too tight, but nice and snug, but not too tight and not too loose. So basically I just kind of cut off a little bit at the top. So as you can see, I don't actually measure to see how long I need to make them with a ruler. I just kind of do a line as to how big I want the box to be, and then I just use the ruler to add a straight line onto them so that way I know how big I want it to be. And I do this, like I said, for all of them. And then what I do is use my little miter cutters to cut them all to the size that I want, and then I just sand down the edges that are uneven or sticking out or kind of sharp, just to get them to look nice and clean. And like I said, I do this for all of them, and then I get to my hot gluing. So then with the hot gluing, what I do is I actually use those little pieces that I cut off, and I use them as little things to adhere the 2 strips together. And this way, just because they're so thin, it's hard to glue them together like one on top of the other. So this way, this will keep them together. I'll still glue them that way, and then I'll kind of like double glue them to make them kind of look like a palette, I guess. Now they do have palettes at the Dollar Tree. I've seen on some of these Facebook groups of people who've gotten things, but I have yet to find them in our dollar stores, and we are now officially locked down where we can't even get craft supplies anymore. So I won't be able to get them even if they did have them. They won't even be putting stuff out. All of that's blocked off. So I will make do with what I have. So what you do see me doing here is I'm getting my miter saw, my hand one, and I am just clipping all of these pieces together, and I've marked off where I wanted to cut them off, and I'm going to use my miter saw for this, but I just wind up using a different saw. This blade is a little bit too strong for this, so my husband gives me another one that I wind up using, but you see me fidgeting around a little bit here. But basically you just need to cut them down. You don't have to do it this way. I just wanted to make sure they were all the same length, and this way I could do that. So when that's all done, I wind up gluing everything together just using my hot glue, and then I wind up staining these pieces using my Rust-Oleum decorative glaze in Java. I've used this in a lot of my videos, and it just gives that nice brown stain. And I also wind up using a little bit of wood glue to glue everything together just to have it stick a little bit better. So once I stain all of them, I wind up just kind of putting my box together. And like I said, I glue all of the sides together, and then at the bottom, I just add a few pieces to hold the cubes together, and it actually helps reinforce the box. So this is a bit of a better angle of what it looks like at the bottom and of all of it being put together. And this will just hold the cubes in place. So here it is all finished. It'll make a great coffee table decoration, like in addition to some other things, maybe in a tray. And my kiddos will love it. They'll probably pull it out and play with it quite a bit. For this DIY, I will be creating another sled. This time it's a wood look sled, and it's another ornament that I picked up at the Dollar Tree for 63 cents, and although it was Christmas decor, I'm using it as winter decor. And in order to make it work, I'm just taking off all of these Christmas decorations. It's a little bit tricky because they are glued on there really, really well, not with just hot glue, but some sort of extra glue on there that they have. So you have to rip them off. I'm not able to save the burlap, but I am able to save that little decoration, so which is great. I can save bits of the burlap, but it's a little bit rough looking, but I won't throw it out. I might be able to use it next Christmas. So I'm just going to take it off here, and then I have to use an X-Acto knife to take off some of the glue. So I'm going to speed it all up, but I'll show you what I did just so you can see it. So it was quite difficult to get all of the glue off. So what I did was I used the X-Acto knife to get the big pieces off, and then to prevent scratching, because the sled it's like a rubbery plastic kind of material. So I didn't want to damage the sled too much, and as I pressed it, it kind of went down, so it's not the most stable sled. So what I did was after that I just used a little bit of sanding block, and I sanded down some of the glue, and it still left it a little bit rough, but remember my theme is rustic winter decor, so it's okay if it's rough. If you wanted it really smooth, you might have to maybe soak it in like a glue remover, but that seems like a lot of work for a little decoration, so just make it rustic looking. So I applied lots of paint here to cover everything up. The paint that I'm using is that matte black that I used on my other sleigh and my stack of books. It's just a mixture of black acrylic paint and a little bit of white paint to get a more muted black color. And I'm painting the sleigh all over. I'm not too terribly worried about full 100% coverage because I will be painting it one more time in a white color. I just want the black to be showing underneath so that I can kind of get a rustic feel. So once this dries, I'm going to apply a coat of white, chalked white, linen white from Rust-Oleum. This is my go-to right now because I'm low on acrylic paint. White acrylic paint, I actually didn't even see the pure white at the Dollar Tree this time, but to be honest, I wasn't looking very hard, but it usually catches my eye when they have it because they did not have it pretty much all summer and all fall. They didn't have it. Then they had it once. I should have gotten more than one bottle, but they had it once during Christmas time, and then I haven't seen it since, and I'm running a little bit low, and I have tons of chalked linen white, so I'm going to use that. And I'm just covering the sled. Again, I'm not too concerned about full coverage because I want it to look kind of like dinged up, like an old dinged up white sled. So once you've covered it top to bottom and it's dried, you're going to make it look even more rustic. And you're just going to take either an X-Acto knife or any kind of tool that you have to scrape some of this paint off so that you have that black and brown showing from underneath. And this is totally up to you. You could even sand some of the paint down if you didn't want quite such rough lines. I really wanted the rough lines. I wanted it to look nice and rustic. And so I just used that little tool is actually a paint can opener, so that's what I used. And I'm already reusing some of those florals from I think this one was from the metal sleigh. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the berries off and I'm just keeping the greenery, and I'm going to be hot gluing it to the sleigh. And then on top of that, I have these little mini pine cones that have been flocked, so like frosted, so they look kind of white. And I'm going to be gluing a few of those on. So it'll look really cute and very, very rustic winter, like perfect for the tier tray. And again, these pine cones are also from the Dollar Tree. I also just added a little scrap piece of burlap and kind of made a little X so it looks like it's a bow and the little bow parts are the pine cones. So it really does have that really rustic farmhousey feel. And then I added longer pieces, scrap pieces of burlap to have like a hanging ribbon. And again, that's all there is to this one. Another few more steps than the other ones, but really, really simple and inexpensive to make. Again, all from the Dollar Tree. And here it is finished. Love the way it turned out. This next decor piece is another really easy DIY to do. Again, I bought this on the clearance section at Dollar Tree for 63 cents. It was a little jar with a snowflake in it and some faux snow in it. So I thought, well, for 63 cents, I can't go wrong. I do have some jars that I could have used, but I don't have any of that kind of faux snow that was in the bottom of the jar. And I thought, well, if I have to buy that, then I might as well just buy this jar and not use up my other jars. And what I'm doing is applying some Mod Podge to the rim. And I do have the little tiny snowflakes, so no, smaller than these ones that I did buy at the beginning of the season from the Dollar Tree. And I'm going to be dipping this rim into those to give the illusion of this being snow covered. I wound up deciding that it wasn't enough to just have the rim, and so I wanted the snow coming down a little bit. And as you can see, I'm not covering it evenly on purpose. I'm having some of it go lower, some of it go higher, so that it looks like the snow was kind of dripping down. And I just cover it this way. Make sure you put something underneath your jar so you can collect those sparkles again and either reuse them or pop them in the jar, whichever, but just don't waste them. There's no point in wasting them. After you dump them over, then you want to go back and see if you missed anything, and if you did, then you go back and pour it over again. And once it dries, if you wanted, you could spray it with a sealer, like a sealing glue. I didn't do that this time because I didn't, you will wind up getting it around the jar, and I didn't want to bother with covering it up, so I'm okay with the way it is. I'm not going to be moving it around. It's just going to sit in the tray, and the tray is high enough that the kids won't touch it. And then once that kind of dries off, then you add your glitter back into the jar and you do your decorations at the top. For the decorations at the top, all I'm doing is using a scrap piece of jute rope from the Dollar Tree. Well, the jute rope is from the Dollar Tree, but the scrap piece is from a different project. It would just happen to be long enough to go around the rim. So I'm going to wrap it around, and then I'm going to add some jute rope to hang off of those little pieces there. And then I'll add those little pine cones that I also got at the Dollar Tree that are snow covered, and a little bit of greenery left over from a different project. And I'm going to hot glue all of that to that little spot there, so it looks like, again, like a little bow at the top. And that's all there's to it. You could put a faux candle in there if you wanted to. I'm just using it like this, just as, like I said, as a little decor piece. Again, really simple, really inexpensive, and very winter-like. And adding that jute rope makes it really rustic as well. Same with the frosted pine cones. Then I wound up taking off the greenery that I added, and this is what it looks like. Like I said, really, really rustic, and very, to me, it's very winter-like.
So we're a few in, about an hour in. Thank you so much for staying on and watching until the very end. You guys are awesome. This is long, I know, but I hope you're enjoying it. These are some of my most favorite DIYs.
So this DIY is a little bit more involved. So what I'm doing is I actually need some scrap white paper and a piece of cardstock and a plastic cup or jar or something, or container. So what I'm doing with the scrap piece of paper, I'm just ripping it up into a whole bunch of pieces. You won't need all of these pieces, but I thought I'd rip it up and have extra because you do need to leave them overnight. So what we're doing first, after we've ripped these pieces up, is we're going to go ahead and spray them with water. So you just want to spray it down so that they're nice and wet. And what I'm doing is I'm just making sure that they're not one on top of the other, and just really soaking them. And then I'm going to leave them to dry overnight. This seems kind of silly, but you'll see later on what I'm going to do with them. And then for the cardstock, you're just going to need a strip of either a light gray or white cardstock. You don't want to use a different color. Those two colors would be best to use. I suppose if you had like a charcoal cardstock, you could use that too, so you can skip the next step. Soaked both sides really well. I just went ahead and well, not both sides, I flipped them. I made sure that they were separated, and I apologize that you can't see better because of the wax paper being so stained. I didn't actually realize it was that bad to see until now. So, but anyway, scrap piece of paper, watered down, let to dry overnight. And while that's drying, then you want to get another, this is just cardstock that I cut to the length of my container. And I'm going to be painting it black, but like more of a matte black. So I'm adding a little bit of white into black acrylic paint. And so what I do is I add a little bit and then I mix it, and if I still need it to be lighter, then I add a little bit more, and basically until you get kind of a lighter black, basically, or a really dark gray. If you have like a charcoal black, maybe acrylic paint, or maybe you have Rust-Oleum charcoal black, then you can use that. Or if you have a really dark gray, you could use that as well. But I didn't, so I mixed it up to get that color. And then you're just going to paint your little strip in that color and let it dry off.
When you're painting, because I'm making a birch candle holder or birch look candle holder, you want to make sure you're going one direction and kind of the way the wood would go. So you're not going up and down, but you're going side to side. So you're going horizontally. And you're just taking your brush and you're kind of doing light strokes. So that way it looks kind of like wood, if you know what I mean. So after this has dried, you're going to dry brush white on it. But before, don't make the mistake I did. Before you do that, you're going to glue on your pieces of paper that have been drying overnight. And you're going to just use Mod Podge to glue those on. And then you're going to dry brush everything together in a white. It could be an acrylic white paint. I'm using chalk linen white because that's what I have on hand, but you could use any any white paint that you have. It doesn't have to be a chalked white or acrylic paint, whichever. So I made the mistake of accidentally putting the paint on a little bit, and then I remembered that I had these. So you're going to want to wrinkle them a little bit, and then you're going to want to glue them on using your Mod Podge. So I was apparently trying to glue them with paint. I don't know what I was thinking. Anyway, sometimes you just you're thinking about what you're doing, but your mind is elsewhere. So anyway, using your Mod Podge, you glue on these pieces of paper that have dried. You're going to wrinkle them a little bit before you glue them on, and you're going to make sure you put lots of Mod Podge. And if they're sticking up a little bit, like if there's like little bubbles or anything like that, that's okay. You want to leave that as is, and you'll see why a little bit later on. You're just adding how, depending on your container, like I think I've added about 4. So it depends on your container how many you're going to add. But you just want to add them, you don't want to add them in any kind of like up and down, like one beside the other or anything like that. Just a few of them to have them um, all around your container. So for my specific container, which is a vitamin container, I'm using 4. And then after you've put the Mod Podge on, you can wait for it to dry, or you can just do what I did and just go and apply the paint. And you're kind of dry brushing it on, and again you're following the grain of the wood, and you're adding more and less depending on where you're putting it on. So on some sides I added more, then I left a little bit off on the other sides, and then I went back, I dried my brush off, and I went back and I just kind of made little lines so that the black would be coming through. And then you have to let this dry again. This DIY is a little bit more involved, and I actually contemplated whether I should include it in this video or not, but I thought, well, it's a great Dollar Tree trash to treasure DIY, and it's winter themed and it's great for a tray, so why not? So I'm using this gummies container, and I had used that. So this is the white cardstock that I used, and I measured how tall I was gonna have the candle holder and how much paper I needed. And I will be cutting this container in half, basically. I think I left 70 millimeters is how tall it is. Um, so just so you get a kind of an idea, it's not very big, but it's also not tiny. These are the big bottles of, this is the big bottle of, there's that, I can't get rid of it. Big bottle of fish oil gummies from Costco. If you didn't have a container that you could use and wanted to buy one, you can always buy one of the candle holders at the Dollar Tree and just make it birch yourself. Um, it doesn't really matter what container you use. I had this one on hand. I had saved it specifically for something. I thought I would make a vase out of it, but this is even better. Now, when you're cutting any kind of plastic bottle like this, you want to be very careful. So what I did was I kind of punctured a hole into it and I used my scissors to cut around it. I thought I was going to use my miter saw, but it was too hard to use it, so scissors worked best. I used the X-Acto knife to just follow a line, a rough line around it. Then I put some tape around the bottle, like after I cut it off with the scissors, just to get a more even cut around. And I will be finishing it off with some burlap so you won't see the rough edges. If you wanted to make it perfect, it would be pretty hard just because the plastic is a little bit soft. That's why I could cut it with the scissors. So the reason I'm putting the little band of tape around the top is so that I can actually wind up cutting it fairly evenly. So that gave me that straight edge to follow with the scissors, so I can get it as close to even as possible. Again, it's an extra step that I took, but you don't have to do that because you'll be covering it up anyway with the burlap, so nobody will see it. And so once you've cut it as perfectly as you are happy with, then you're just going to paint the top of it and the bottom. It pretty much winds up being almost the whole thing, but the top and bottom you're going to paint out white. So in case the little piece of paper shows through or whatever so that you can't see it, um, you could paint the whole thing white. It doesn't really matter. I did it just more of a precaution. You don't even necessarily have to do that. But again, I'm using that Rust-Oleum white, chalked white linen white paint. That paint goes a long way for me, and as I said before, I constantly run out of white acrylic paint. So for bigger things, I also like to use the linen white because it goes really nicely on everything. It's not too expensive to buy, and I always buy the big container at Home Depot, so that way it lasts me quite a bit. And I'm sorry I don't have the footage, but once this is dry, you're going to take your bark that you had colored gray and you're going to hot glue it around the container. And then you're going to take just like a little pick, and anywhere where you have glued down those little white pieces of paper, you're going to try and scrape them off. Sometimes you'll just lift them up a little bit, sometimes you'll take them off completely. If you've taken too much off and the white is now showing, or it's a little bit awkward, then you're just going to dry brush some of that black paint back on. And as you can see parts there's lifted, parts are missing, and it's just giving the illusion of bark, which is what you wanted to do. Then you're going to take care of that top part, and you're going to take a piece of burlap and just wrap it around the top and see how much you need. I'm just taking that roll of burlap that I've been using for other projects and I'm cutting it in half again, and then I'm going to glue the uneven part on the inside of the cup and the even part on the outside. You should use hot glue to glue this down. And then to add more decoration, I have a little bit of the Christmas tree left from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to add the little green part branches so it looks like it has some greenery on it, and that's it for this one. Again, another really easy DIY, but a lot of steps to it. So this one was probably the most involved one out of all of them, but I think it turned out really great. I will be putting a candle from the Dollar Tree into it, and I won't light this candle up, but it's just more for like a decorative purpose, but it turned out really nice and it'll look great in the tiered tray decor, and it's great, perfect for winter. All I'm doing is painting out these wood letters. Now these are not Valentine's Day wood letters. The Dollar Tree always has these letters. So I was lucky enough to find XOXO. They don't always have all the letters, or they'll have one and not more than one, but if you go there often enough, you can
collect enough so that way you have it for whatever you need it for. They had just gotten a new shipment when I went, so they had tons of letters. So I actually picked up XOXO, Love, and Snow. So I'm just going to be painting these ones out in that cotton candy pink. I'm removing the signs on the back because I'm painting them on both sides. So I wound up doing 2 coats on each side because the brown showed through a little bit. These are really cute and they're such a nice pale pink. And to me, that pale pink and white and dinged up and all of that stuff and the glaze, it all just has that rustic farmhouse look. And these will go great in any tray. So for Valentine's Day, I like this XOXO because what I've done is I've glued the XO and the O together. So you'll see I'm going to hot glue it together, but not the full XOXO because I wanted to be able to maybe have a little bit of height in my tray where I put one of the XOs on the higher part and then the other one just down below. And it just gives you the options, or you could do it straight across, either or. But if I hot glue them together, then that's what I was stuck with, and I didn't want to be stuck with anything. And I didn't want to wreck it if next year I decide to use it differently and then I have to redo it. Why cause yourself more work than you have to? So again, as I said, once I paint them, I just hot glue the X and the O together, let it dry, and done. Another very, very easy DIY. Just took a bit of time because of the painting because I had to do it twice. Well, 2 coats, not twice. I had to do 2 coats. And so here's what they looked like all finished. I love them. I love that pink and I love the way they turned out. And I hope you do as well. So here are all of the DIYs together. For the last DIY, I picked up this sign at the Dollar Tree. It wasn't in the Valentine's section, it was just in the home decor section. And I loved it because it had that galvanized metal in the back and this cute little heart. So what I'm going to do is remove this heart. I thought it was hot glued on there, so I was trying to rip it off, but it's actually screwed in. So I've got this cute little screwdriver set that I got as like a swag gift from somewhere, but it's a little bit too big, so I wound up using a different one. But you just have to unscrew it and remove that heart. Really easy to do. I'm so glad that it was screwed in and not hot glued because I think sometimes with the glue you might break it as you're trying to take it off. This is an incredibly easy DIY because I'm just basically redoing what the Dollar Tree already made. So I've taken this heart off and I've used sandpaper to sand off the This Is Us because I wasn't particularly happy with the way it looked. And I'm using my Rust-Oleum decorative glaze just to stain this heart a little bit of a darker color. You could use acrylic paint and make your own kind of stain. I've talked about this in several videos. The best one to watch is the stocking video from in my Christmas playlist because that's where I used paint to stain wood. But I'm using this decorative glaze to stain it, and I'm just putting it right back on there, screwing it back on, and then to give it a little bit of a pop of Valentine's, I'm just going to add a little bit of ribbon. You don't even have to add the ribbon. The ribbon is very optional. I just thought it would give it a more of a Valentine's Day vibe, but again, you don't have to add it. So once I attach the heart back, the ribbon that I'm using is the burlap heart ribbon from the Dollar Tree. And again, I'm going to be hot gluing a bow together. And then I'll just hot glue this to the galvanized tray part just to add a little bit of a bow and a little bit of Valentine's flair. And that's all there is to this DIY. This was basically a makeover, and I wanted to show you guys this because you don't have to have, an incredible amount of tools or anything like that to do it, to make some of the Dollar Tree decor look that much more high-end. This was from the Dollar Tree, but I'm pretty sure if you went to Marshall's, you can find something very similar to this without the This Is Us. I think that the This Is Us made it look a little bit cheaper, but by adding a darker stain, and you could still put something back, a saying back on there, but maybe using a different font if you have a Cricut. But I just wanted to show you how you can kind of make over something from the Dollar Tree with very little supplies and make it look so much better than it did originally. So here's what it is all finished. So here it is all finished. I think it's really cute and it'll fit perfectly with my decor. So if you guys are interested in seeing more videos, make sure you check out the ones I've recommended for you in this video and at the end here. For the first love sign, I'm going to be using these wood letters and this wood heart from the Dollar Tree. And I want to give them the galvanized look. So they're wood, but I want them to look like steel. So to achieve this look, I'm using these 3 paints plus a white acrylic paint. So I'm using some black acrylic paint, some brown acrylic paint, and some dark blue acrylic paint. And what I do is I put all of these paints on a little small plate and then I just dab on each color on its own. You'll see what I mean by that. I've made many galvanized look things before on my video and on my channel, so feel free to check those out. Those will be more in-depth tutorials, but I thought this one would be a really neat look for this vase. And I'm also using some silver as well, so blue, silver, black, brown, and dark and white. So depending on the project, sometimes I paint out the project first in a different color and sometimes I just dab it on. For this one I was just dabbing everything on because that brown was kind of a look that I thought I could blend in together with these letters to achieve what I wanted, so I did not paint the letters. Now I wanted to attach these letters to a sign, and I want it to be a vertical sign that's quite tall that I could either put on my fireplace or in a corner in my hallway. I haven't decided exactly where I'll be putting it, but I just wanted a tall vertical sign. So when I saw this sign at the Dollar Tree, this love sign, I thought it was perfect. I thought it was a cute sign. I thought maybe I could keep the barn board on the back and that the letters would cover the red fully, but unfortunately they're a little bit too thick for the letters that I'm using. So I'm just going to remove the burlap heart and paint over the sign, and I'm going to use my chalked linen white paint only because I need quite a bit of paint and I only have that small little bottle of the acrylic paint. And I'm saving this heart, that's why I'm taking it out gently, and then I just peel off the excess of this cardboard slash pressboard, whatever it is that's glued on here, just so that I can have a nice even finish. And I like that this sign has the little slits in it, so it makes it look like barn board even more, which I love. So I do 2 coats of the white and it still shows, the red still kind of comes through, but because I'm putting those letters on top and I'm going to be distressing it, I'm okay with a little bit of that red showing, and you'll see what I mean after. It just gives it that distressed look, which I love. If you really don't like the red coming through and really want it to be covered fully, I would paint the sign black. Then I would paint white over top of it and then sand it down so you have that distressed look coming through. But what I'm doing is I painted it white and then I'm just adding this black acrylic paint. It's in this cup because I had used it for something else and then saved it this way. And I'm adding a little bit of the white just to cover in some of those spots where I did too much and to give it a more, like, I wanted almost like a dirty old sign look, if that makes any sense. I'm very technical in my terms. But anyway, you'll see the finished product eventually. So I'm just dabbing it on. I'm not too worried about dry brushing because there isn't much paint left in here, so I'm not kicking on a lot of paint. If you have fresh paint, I would dab off the excess so you kind of do like a dry brushing. Then I just use hot glue to attach the letters, the LOVE. And for the O, I'm not using an O, I'm using a wooden heart like I showed you at the beginning. And then I am just painting that heart out in the cotton candy pink, and I'll be attaching that as well to the sign. And that's all there is to this sign. It's really, really simple, very inexpensive. It was definitely $1, $2, $3, $4 for the sign. $5 for the entire sign plus paint, but most of us have some white and black paint and blue paint on hand. But anyway, just for the materials other than the paint, it was about $5. So a cheap sign to make, and I've seen these at Marshall's and places like that. They go for 30, 40 bucks. So really cute. Love the way it turned out. Gives it that distressed look because I used that combination of the white and black. So love it. I got this Dollar Tree not last year but the year before, and I just never did anything with it. So I'm just going to paint it out white, and I'm using the Rust-Oleum chalk linen white paint to do this. I'm only doing one coat of the white because I'm going to be giving this a galvanized steel look like I did with the first sign. So it doesn't need to have full coverage. I just wanted it to be covered in the white, like as a base coat. So again, I'm using a combination of the silver, the blue, the black, the brown, and the white paint. And like I said, I put them on a plate and I just use them as I need it, like as I'm dabbing on. I don't really have a set, you have to do this first and that second. I basically kind of put a little bit of this, and then I think, oh, it needs some blue, then I put blue, then it needs black, white, and I just keep on going until I achieve the look that I'm going for. I just wanted to show you what it looks like if you paint it and if you don't paint it before. And to me, it doesn't really make that much of a difference, but to some people it might, so you can kind of look and see which one you like better. As you can see, I dabbed on the black first, and then I went with the blue and the silver and the other colors. I left the O blank because the O I'm going to be putting some moss on, so it's green. The moss that I'm using for the O is actually this moss ribbon that I got at the Dollar Tree. I've only ever seen it once. I haven't seen it since then, and I kind of like it. It's supposed to stick on its own, but it wasn't really sticking too much. So I just put some hot glue and I cut it to size. I don't ever waste anything, so I wound up using those little pieces that I cut off as well. And again, another really simple $2 DIY, really and easy to make, inexpensive, and I think it, again, that farmhouse rustic look, beautiful love sign. So if you guys can let me know which love sign you guys loved, that would be great. I can't pick a favorite. If I had to, it would probably be this one and the very first one, but I love all of them equally. They all have a special place that I kind of have an idea of where I'll put in my home, and they'll look really nice with my rustic farmhouse kind of taste that I have. I did do some really pink DIY, so there'll be like pops of those in other places. Like I said, check that out on the home channel. Let me know what you guys thought, but before we move on, I just want to show you what this looks like completed. This galvanized look never gets old to me. I love it so much, and I'm in love with the way these turned out. So, ball vase from the Dollar Tree. This is another simple DIY. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and taken off the sticker. It was really, the glue was really on there. I even bought this little thing from the Dollar Tree that's supposed to help remove the gunk, kind of like Goo Gone type of thing or whatever. I really do need Goo Gone, but I keep on forgetting to buy it when I'm out at the store. So what I'm doing is just sanding it down as much as I can, and I'm also going to sand the entire piece just to get it really scuffed up, because I'm going to be antiquing this little piece so it's not so shiny. I saw this idea from several people on YouTube and on Pinterest, and I thought it was amazing. There was all sorts of different ideas, but I kind of did my own. So what I'm doing is just soaking some paper towel in vinegar after I sanded. The sanding piece is very important, so you have to sand it and scuff it up really well. And then I'm going to be adding these paper towels to the piece and letting it sit there for a half an hour. Now I wound up doing that, and then I wound up actually putting the back of the piece into a aluminum bin that I filled with vinegar to give it even more. So I probably let it soak a total of about an hour and a half in vinegar with a combination of paper towels and it sitting in a bath of vinegar. Now, if you're doing the paper towel method, you're not like submerging everything in the vinegar. You have to come back every few minutes and re-soak the paper towels. Otherwise, they'll dry out and it won't work. So I probably went every 10 minutes to go and soak them. And then for the first half an hour, and then for the next, I think it was like 45 minutes around there, I wound up just submerging it and then pouring more vinegar over top. And I did not go back. I just left it to sit there. So here is what it looks like after I removed the paper towels. It's nice and aged and I love it. It looks so antiqued. And it was so easy to do. I mean, it took a little bit of time, but really, really easy to do. And then I'm going to add these floral picks from the Dollar Tree. I think I used 4 different branches. And I put some floral foam into the wall vase so that I could stick the picks in there, and I just do it so these long ones with the white so that they kind of hang at the bottom, and then the other ones I just put in. Really, this is to your taste. You can put lavender in there if you have it. I just did another project with lavender, so I didn't want to add lavender in there, but you can put anything you want in there. And I really like this because I'll be able to use it in the summer, in the fall, and for Christmas too, because the vase itself is versatile, and then you just change out the floral picks. I do take apart the floral picks too, so I don't wind up using quite all 4 of them, but take them apart, make them fit however you want. They don't need to be in the bunch that came in from the store. Don't be afraid to do that. And you don't need to throw them out. If you cut it too short, you can use it for a different project. And that's all there is to this DIY. Really, really simple, very inexpensive, cost me under $5, and it looks beautiful. So here's the finished piece. I just wanted to do a close-up of the vase again just so you could see how nicely antiqued it is. It's beautiful. I love it so much. And you do it within an hour rather than having to wait years for that to happen. And here it is just hanging up. It has little holes at the back so you can either attach some rope, or if you have a thinner nail you can attach it that way, and it looks gorgeous. DIY, I'm going to be painting out this galvanized steel planter again from the Dollar Tree. Although I think it's cute, and I thought about aging this one as well, I thought I'd show you something a little bit different. It's still going to be distressed, it's still going to be antiqued, but a little bit differently. So I'm going to be using my Rust-Oleum chalked linen white paint to paint over this, and I do 2 coats of it. Not too heavy of coats, but enough to cover it so that it's not showing the steel too much. So if you guys haven't been to my channel before, welcome. My name is Vesna and this is Vesna TV. On this channel I do all sorts of DIY decor pieces on a budget. I do Dollar Tree DIYs, trash treasure, thrift flips, basically anything that I can find and make beautiful. I do it, and like I said, I do it on a budget. So if that's the kind of stuff you like, make sure you hit the subscribe button. If you haven't subscribed, hit that notification bell so you can see when I have new videos, and let me know in the comments below that you've subscribed. So after that dries, what I do is I take a baby wipe and I remove some of the paint from the letters, and I'm doing this to make it look even more rustic. I will be going over it with black, but I want it to look even more rustic, so I'm doing this just by removing some of the paint from the letters, and it'll bring out the darker color from beneath. And then I make sure that all of my colors are unified, so I took off a glob of paint with a baby wipe, and then I add black acrylic paint to the top and the bottom using that baby wipe to wipe off excess paint, and then I dry brush all around the container to make it look even more distressed. And that's it for the paint part. As you can see, I painted a little bit on the inside, but not all the way, and it's just that if I put something else in there so that the silver or the steel doesn't show through, but I didn't need to waste paint all the way down because I will never have it empty. And then I'm going to stuff it. Now, here's where I kind of made a bit of a mistake. I did not have enough fluorofoam to put fluorofoam down, so I thought I could just do a little bit of just brown paper and this egg carton. I always use egg cartons kind of as stuffing. And then I thought I could just poke the tulips in there, but unfortunately, they weren't staying up straight, so I had to use a little bit of fluorofoam that I had. I just didn't have enough to do the whole thing, so I just kind of played around with it. And then what I wound up doing is I put a skewer into the bottom of the tulips, and then I wound up hot gluing it inside and poking through little pieces of fluorofoam, and that helped it stay. But before I did that, I decided I wanted to put legs on this, and I just took a cork and I cut it in half, 2 corks, and I cut them in half, painted them white, and hot glued them to the bottom, just to give little feet to this container. And I'm stuffing the container also with some floral moss. I really wanted the bulbs to show. That's why I didn't hot glue them down, because I could have just hot glued them down and it would have been fine, but I wanted the bulbs to show, so that's why I went the skewer route. But if you do go the skewer route, I suggest you put a full piece of fluorofoam in the bottom, like have it in there nice and snug so it doesn't move. If you have to put extra, you put extra. And then put the piece of piece of skewer into the bottom of the bulb, and have it be long enough that the bulb can stay at the top, and the part is skewered in, like stuffed into the fluorofoam, and then put your moss over top. Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, leave me a comment and I'll explain better. So that's all there is to it. It was a really easy DIY, again, inexpensive. I actually got these tulips last year at the end of the season, so they were 50% off. So great DIY, and I love it's very spring-like to me. So here's what it looks like all finished. And again, this container you can use all year round, which is great. Just change out the flowers in it, which I love. I always love when I can kind of transition my decor because it gets kind of out of hand trying to store everything. And then that's all there's to it. So let me know which one is your favorite. Leave me a comment below. So excited to make these. I picked up 4 of these little clay flower pots from the Dollar Tree. They're $1.25 for 2 of them, or $1 if you're in the States. We're in Canada, so everything is $1.25. And I'm just going to be painting them out in the chalked linen white paint again. As you can see, I use this paint often. I have this big bucket of it and it goes a long way. So I'm only using 3 of them, and like I said, I'm going to be painting them out. I only need to do 1 coat. It covers them pretty nicely. So I'm just curious, does everyone decorate for spring first and then Easter, or do you guys do spring and Easter together? And if so, when do you start with that? When do you end your winter decor and then start with your spring? I'm curious to know. I'm jumping right into spring. Actually, this past weekend, I decorated for spring. I'm going to be decorating for Easter really soon. I just need to finish making my DIYs. There's a few things that I want to make still, and I will be ready for spring and Easter probably maybe the first week of March, I'm assuming. At least for Easter. For spring, I'll be ready now, but for Easter, I'll be ready then. And I'm hoping next year that I can start decorating earlier and maybe start my DIYs a bit earlier so that way they're ready to go when I'm ready to decorate. But anyway, let me know in the comments below when you start your decorating and if you do spring and Easter together or do you separate them. So for this DIY, I did use my Cricut. I used my Cricut to write the words grow, plant, and bloom. And I just used the skinny font for this. I downloaded the font, I believe, from DaFont. So I'm just cutting out the words, and then I'm going to be weeding them and just applying the vinyl. This is a permanent black vinyl, so I'm just going to take off what I don't need, use some transfer paper. I always use shelf liner as transfer paper, so I'm going to use my transfer paper and I'm going to stick them on. The vinyl itself has a sticky back, so I don't need to worry about gluing it or anything like that. You can Mod Podge these after just to protect them a little bit more. I'm not going to. They're just going to be sitting on a tray. No one's going to be touching them, so it should be fine. Once I put the words on, I used some dry floral foam from the Dollar Tree again, and I cut little pieces just so I could fit them into the pot. You don't need much. You literally just need a few squares. And this was just so that I could squish the picks into there. And I'm using, it's thistle. I said it was dandelion before because I used the tops of that, but it's thistle. Again from the Dollar Tree, and I'm cutting one branch and I'm using it in all 3 containers, and then I use another branch that I cut and I use it in all 3 containers. And this is just so it goes a longer way. I cut off the length as much as I need to, and I'm using purple and green. And then I decide after that I want a little bit more and I add yellow, but I didn't use all of the yellow and all of the green. You'd pay quite a bit more than, the $2, maybe $3 that I spent between the floral picks and the pots, but these are beautiful and I think they'll go beautifully on my tray. It'll be perfect. For this next DIY, I purchased this clover from the Dollar Tree. It's not too bad at the one at the back, like at the front as well, but I didn't want to use that side. I had seen an image on Pinterest of what looked kind of like a palette clover. So that's what I'm going to be trying to recreate with this one. So I'm using this as my base, and I have these strips of cardboard that I cut that I'm going to be hot gluing onto this clover and painting out. Now what I'm doing is I'm just cutting them into different shapes so that way it looks like it's stacked palette wood. It's not all one size. One is smaller, one is bigger, so it just kind of looks like a staggered pattern. So after I attach all of the pieces, then I use an X-Acto knife and scissors just to cut off the excess so that it's the same shape as the clover. So I picked up several different colors for my spring and Easter and summer DIYs. So I'm using, as you saw before, the leaf green, forest green. Those are my darker greens, and then the lime green and neon green, as well as white acrylic paint. And I'll just be mixing them as I go until I achieve the look that I'm going for. I wanted to look a little bit aged and dull. Once I achieve the amount of green that I'm going for, I let it dry and then I just distress it further with a little bit of espresso brown paint, acrylic paint, and I just lightly, almost dry brush on some of this brown, just all over the piece in spots where I think it needs to look a little bit more aged. And that is it for this piece. I'm really excited the way it turned out. I did wind up adding a little bit of black in there too, but I think it looks beautiful and aged and rustic. This is a super easy one. I'm taking this package of eggs from the Dollar Tree, and it's a package of 6 eggs. I'm going to dump these eggs and I'm going to spray paint the carton in just a black spray paint that I have on hand. I'm not going to record myself spray painting it, but just any old black paint will do. Then once it's spray painted, I just add a little bit of the cashmere tan acrylic paint from the Dollar Tree around. I just dry brush it lightly and I glue in the eggs back and wait for it to all dry. Once all of that's done, I cut these little strips just from black construction paper, and I'm going to be having that as my banner around the eggs. And I'll use my Cricut to write in farm fresh eggs, 25 cents. And then I will be hot gluing that to the container as well, and I'll be adding some deer moss as well. And I just use the Cricut font, and for the Farm Fresh, I did about 1/2 inch tall, and then for the eggs, I did about 0.6 tall, just a little bit bigger than the Farm Fresh, and the strips were about 1 inch wide, and just long enough to cover the container. And I was really excited because I then used this glue gun to glue down the moss as well as the Farm Fresh, and I just wanted it to look like it was wrapped around, so I just glued it at the sides, and I did this for both, and then I just added moss in between, and that's all there is to this project. Really easy. Using this Happy Easter sign from the Dollar Tree, which I purchased for $1.25 because our Dollar Tree is $1.25 here. And I'm going to be using it to create a nice little hop sign. And what's great about this is I'm going to reuse the whole sign. I'm going to take it apart, but I'm going to reuse the whole sign so that way none of it will go to waste. I start with removing the staples from the back to get the little rope off. I thought I would keep the rope, but then I wound up cutting it after. It doesn't really matter how you take it out. I just decided to do it this way, thinking that I might even use the other side too for something. I didn't wind up using it, but you can take it out any way you want. I'm just taking it apart carefully, and then I'm going to be filling the holes at all the holes at the front with some putty just so that they are covered. I'm going to be taking the nose off. I thought I would be able to leave the face as is, but when I took the nose off and the little bow, some of it peeled off, so I wound up painting it. I did remove the nose carefully because I wanted to be able to keep it, but even if I was careful, the glue was really stuck on there, so it did take off some of the paint. So I just wound up sanding it down and painting it white. You will most likely have to do that as well, unless you're lucky and it doesn't take not even the paint, it's whatever that paper is that's on there off. You want to make sure you sand it off because it'll smooth off wherever the paper came off, so it's somewhat even, and so it doesn't show too much when you paint it. And I'm just using the Rust-Oleum chalk linen white paint to paint over this bunny. Once I have this bunny painted, I go ahead and I paint the letters. I bought these wooden letters at the Dollar Tree. I bought an H and a P. However, I didn't actually buy an H. I bought an N, which we wound up cutting with my husband, and I wound up gluing it to make an H. So what he did was he cut off the middle part of the N, and then I just flipped the sides over because the way the N is. And he cut down the middle part to make it look like an H. I just measured out how big this P was, and that's what I did. And I just used some wood glue to glue it together. I did this because I could not find an H anywhere, so I wound up just doing it this way. And then I also painted out a paint stick, and I used one of the longer ones that I had from a project, and I painted it out white because that'll be the base for my hop. So here I just show you how I glued it, and this is what I mean by I flipped it over so that the top you would see the nice edges of the N. And then the bottom, as you can see, he just could not cut it for it to look this way. So I told him to just leave it and that I would cover the bottom so you wouldn't be able to see it. It's obviously better if you can find the H, but I went to two Dollar Trees and they did not have it. So I just improvised. I could have also used maybe like cardboard and just cut a few pieces and glued them together for the H and the P, but I decided to do it this way. So after I've painted and dried everything, I go ahead and I distress the sign, and I'm just using some black acrylic paint, and I'll just be putting a little bit on the brush and dabbing it off to give it that aged look. And as you can see, I did not paint the whole bunny sign really well. I left it kind of roughly painted, and that was because I was going to be distressing and just added to it. Now I did add a little bit of white into the black just so it wasn't such a strong black color. So it was a little bit lighter, maybe like a really dark gray. And then I just go ahead and I distress the sides and all over the bunny, as well as the letters and the base. I also distressed the carrots a little bit with that black just to have them kind of match the distressed look of the bunny. And I distressed the base, the paint stir stick as well. I start with attaching the nose because that's going to be my center, and from there I know where I need to draw the eyes and how big I need to make them, as well as the whiskers. I'm just using a black Sharpie to do this. If you are talented enough, you can use a brush. I'm not very good with the fine point brushes. Maybe I don't have good ones. They always kind of wind up looking a little bit sloppy. You could also use, if you want to cut out vinyl stickers, you could do that as well. But this was just as easy and it was very simple to do. Once I did my distressing, I attached the letters and the bunny. I attached the first letter so I could see where I wanted and how much room I needed for the bunny. And then I attached the second letter. Now the bunny was kind of falling down just on its own. So then I added these little cubes from the Dollar Tree on the back, and I did them quite high just so that the bunny would stick a little bit better. I did use a combination of wood glue and hot glue to attach the bunny, and then I just hot glued the carrots. But as you can see, when I flipped over, that's where I found out that I needed a bit more, and I just kind of made a base for the bunny at the bottom, and then I just built them up a little bit. And that helped the bunny stay. If you're finding that this isn't working, what you could do, so because you can see I played around with it quite a bit, what you could do is build out that bottom part with 2 tumble block pieces of wood and just glue those on and have the bunny stick to that, and then that way it's sticking to a flat surface rather than the round trying to stick to the base. But I didn't have any tumble blocks, so this is what I did. And like I said, once I played around with it a bit and built it up a bit more, it did wind up sticking. And that's all there is to this DIY. It cost around $3, very inexpensive, and I think it looks really cute. And it's something that you could find at like a Winners or a Marshalls for sure. That would be definitely a lot more than $3. So here it is. I absolutely love the way it turned out. So for this first DIY, I'm going to be making kind of like a Halloween pumpkin topiary. So this here is my inspiration for what I'm going to be making, and hopefully I nailed it. So I'm using this wooden pumpkin from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to paint it out in black. Now I am using Rust-Oleum chalk paint in charcoal black. I just love the way this looks. It's a nice matte finish and it dries fast, and a little goes a long way. So I just paint the whole piece in this color. So again, I will need 3 pieces, so this is one of the pieces that I'm using. So for the second part of the topiary, I'm going to be using these 2 wooden pieces from the Dollar Tree. They're wooden pumpkins. One is just a plain pumpkin, and the other one is the same pumpkin as before. Now I do want this to be the larger piece, so I'm combining both, and I like the texture of the top one, so I do want to add it to this as well. And I will be painting out this in orange, but I do add a little bit of brown and black acrylic paint because the orange acrylic paint that I have is really, really strong and bright, so I just want to dull it down a little bit. So before I paint it, I do go ahead and I scrape everything off that needs to be scraped off, and I glue the pieces together. The first time I try to glue them, hot glue them, I did not line up the stems, so I have to line up the stems, and that way they line up nicely. I will wind up cutting the stems off, but I didn't want to do that until I put the whole topiary together. So once this piece is done, I go ahead and I use this metal pumpkin from the Dollar Tree again. This I only saw this year and I really, really liked it. I was going to make something different with these, but I just didn't get a chance to, so I thought I would use it for this DIY. And again, it has that texture that the other 2 pieces have, so I thought the top having even a little bit more texture would be really nice, but I wasn't a fan of the yellow, so I do wind up painting over the yellow parts, well, the entire piece, and just this warm white from the Dollar Tree. It's just an acrylic paint. It's like an antique white almost. Now this piece did come with a bit of a stem, so I wound up cutting that off with some wire cutters. and kind of ripping it off too. It's just hot glued on there, so it's not too hard to rip off. So once that's dried and painted and dried, oops, I go ahead and assemble the topiary. So now here's where I'm trying to see how I'm going to put them together, what I need to cut off, what I need to add, where I need to cut it off. So I decide that I'm going to, again, cut that stem off. So I go ahead and I do that. And I just have these miter shears that are really good for doing stuff like this. And they're pretty easy to cut with these. And then I hot glue the black pumpkin on top. Now, the only tricky part of all of this, now you probably didn't even have to cut that off. You could have just hot glued on there, but I might use that little orange for something else. So I always kind of, if I can save little bits and pieces, I always save them. So anyway, I hot glue that onto the bottom piece. The tricky part was the top piece because it was metal, and hot gluing metal is quite hard. So I kind of had to get creative with that. So originally I thought I could glue back the pick and just have it kind of stick to the pick, but it didn't work. So then I went ahead and I just stuck some paint stir sticks onto the back, and then I was able to glue the top part. The two tricks with this was it was the metal and also the texture in the bottom pumpkin, and the fact that this one is a little bit curved, so it was hard to get it to be the same level as the other ones and have it kind of stick nicely. So by gluing that paint stir stick, I was able to have a place to attach it at the top and a place to attach it at the bottom. Hopefully when you see it, it makes sense. Now to make sure that it sticks completely, I did tie a little bit of floral wire around the top, so just where the stem was and where the stir stick met the stem, and then I just kind of painted over top in some black just to hide the floral wire and a little bit of the stir stick that was showing. You could use weld bond, and this would also probably stick to it right away, but I thought this way it just won't move at all. So then I slid it over top of the stem, and I hot glued it at the stem and at the bottom in two spots just to make sure that it really sticks. And that's all there was to assembling the topiary. And then I had to add a base so that the topiary would stand on its own. So for the base, I just kind of measured out, as you can see here, it's not the best angle, but I kind of measured out how many tumbling blocks I needed. And then I glued them all together and I painted them black and orange. And I just hot glued them. I'm using Gorilla Glue, so I'm hoping that the hot glue sticks. If you wanted a more permanent hold and to be sure that it would stick forever, then you can use some Gorilla Glue or E6000, whichever permanent glue that you have, and kind of do a combination of hot glue and that glue. But I was going to try this and see how it went. And so far it's been holding up okay. I've had it for about a week made and it hasn't come apart, so I think we're good. So I glued 5 pieces together lengthwise for each side. And then I just glued them to the base of the pumpkin. And after seeing it completed, I saw that I wanted to add a little bit more to the pieces. So I went ahead and I added some black acrylic paint to the orange and white pumpkins to add a bit more texture and depth. So because I am using the small tumble blocks, they weren't quite strong enough for this topiary, so just to do a single layer. So then I wound up adding a whole bunch at the back. Now if you use bigger ones, you won't have to add as many, but just a little bit more to make it stand so it doesn't fall over. And then the pumpkins needed to be Halloween, not just kind of fall colored. So I have these spiders that I got. Well, this one is from my kids' spider collection. They said they didn't want this one, so I spray painted him black. He was red. And then I also added some of the spiders from the Dollar Tree that were on little clips, and I hot glued them to the pumpkin. So here's the finished topiary with all of the spiders and all of the scary stuff. Love it. I'm so in love with this piece. It's going to look great in my Halloween decor. Let me know what you think of this one. Dupe. My colors are a little bit different, but I think I nailed this one too. For this dupe, I'm actually using this sign from the Dollar Tree just for the welcome because I couldn't find the metal welcome words this time around. I did actually find them after I made this DIY, but anyway. And this little pumpkin sign as well from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to basically, this is the easiest DIY ever. I'm going to take that welcome sign off, give it a little bit of a coat of paint, and I'm going to give this guy a coat of paint, add some ribbon, and that's it. But it's a really cute little Halloween. It could be for a tray, it could just be a little sign, whatever you wanted it to be. So for the paint, I am using the Rust-Oleum chalked charcoal paint, chalked paint in charcoal. And I'm using this paint because, again, as I said, it dries fast, it gives me that matte color, and I think it looks great with purple, and I'm adding purple accents. So the welcome sign, I wanted it to be purple, but the only purple that I had was a really light purple from the Dollar Tree, so I added a little bit of black into it just to make it a bit darker. And I'm not fully covering it, I just wanted it to kind of have like a purple metallic look, if that makes sense to you. So I did 2 coats of it, but again, they were kind of very light coats, so you still have a little bit of that metal shining through. So I wind up hot gluing this welcome sign, and I want it to be kind of diagonal a little bit on to the pumpkin, and then I use some Halloween ribbon from the Dollar Tree and I cut it into strips, and then I hot glue it so it looks like a little bow at the top. And then I also add a spider, and it was one of the spiders from the Dollar Tree that came on the clips. And so here is the finished piece. Like I said, really simple, but very cute little DIY. Again, you could use them in a tray, you could use them as a piece of decor, really up to you, but I love the way he turned out. And here's the final dupe. I really like the way mine turned out too. So let me know what you think. Mine was 100% almost cheaper. It only cost about $1.50 to make. And so here's my last Kirkland's dupe. This is like almost not even, it's just such an easy dupe. So all I'm doing is I've got some branches from the garden that I just picked up. We had a nice windstorm, so I had tons of branches. And I have this little crate from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to spray paint both in that Tremclad black, flat black paint. And once I do that, I assemble the pieces together. So I was closing that paint because even after the spill, I still hadn't closed it. But anyway, so I'm going to put some floral foam into the crate, and then I'll add some rocks on the top just to hide it. And then I'll put the branches in, and then I'll put the rocks over top to hide the little floral foam. And then I attach some spiders to this. I wanted to attach little birds, but I couldn't find them, so they didn't have them at the Dollar Tree. And they had the wood bats, but they weren't big enough, so I just used these little spiders. And again, it's those ones with the clips on them, but I took the clips off and I hot glued them. And that's all there is to this one. The rocks actually serve 2 purposes. They keep the piece from toppling over because the branches are so tall, and they hide the floral foam. And here it is completed. I really like the way it turned out. It's very cute. It's very kind of spooky, but yet very simple. And I left the spiders purple because I thought they would just add a little pop of color, and I'm loving the purple and the black together this year. So for the first one, I'm going to be using this Tremclad flat white spray paint. It's just a spray paint I had on hand. And I'm going to be using this Christmas tree and a crate. Don't worry about this square. I will be using this as well, but I'm going to be using the crate for this DIY, as well as some foam blocks from the Dollar Tree and some red spray paint. I will also use some vinyl to cut out for my writing, and then that's all there is to this DIY. Actually, there'll be a little bit of a ribbon as well. So what I've done is I've spray painted the Christmas tree. I've written down the numbers on my little foam blocks using a paint pen, and I've cut out Christmas countdown using a child's font from DaFont. And I wanted it to look like a child had written down Christmas countdown, and I actually did Xmas countdown. I know some people really don't like that being used for Christmas, but for this, I thought it would be really cute as like a little child's countdown. So I just removed my vinyl, and I always use transfer paper for transferring the vinyl because when you have like a sign or anything like that, it tends to stretch quite a bit. So I apply that, and you have to be really careful because when you have little thin fonts, it wants to raise up. So just when you're pulling it off, just be careful. So this video is a part of the DIY collab that Domestic Diva hosts, and it's a great collab because there's a whole bunch of creators that come together and we create a playlist of different DIYs that we're doing. The theme for this month is Christmas. So if you haven't had a chance to check out this challenge, make sure you check it out. I'll have the playlist linked in my description, and I'll have Sonia over at Domestic Diva DIY. I'll have her information linked in my description below as well. Make sure you check her out. She is one super talented lady. Once I get my vinyl on there, I wanted to put a little bit of a bow up top, and I thought I'd put it kind of halfway down. Then I didn't like that, so I put it a little bit higher, and I still didn't like that. So then I took some ribbon and I just added like a bow to the top that kind of flowed down, and I really liked the way that turned out. And again, I just made a little bow, tying it kind of like you would a shoelace, and just hot glued it on. There was a little crack in the Christmas tree, so I was just adding some glue to fix it up. So after I added all of that, I just touched up some of the cubes because the paint had kind of ripped off when it was drying, and I put it in, and there's my countdown. I think it's really, really cute. What do you think? So for the DIY number 2, I am using these wood snowflakes, which I got at Dollar Tree, and they're just different sizes, and they're not sticky at the back. They're just little wood cutouts, and I'm spray painting them in that same Tremclad flat white spray paint. And I'm also using a bamboo cutting board, and this is another super easy one. All of these are really quick and easy DIYs. So I'm just going to be, once these snowflakes dry, I'm going to be creating a Christmas tree. So I just kind of try to figure out how I want the sizing to work and the pattern. This is totally personal preference, so kind of play around with it and see what you like. It all depends on what size your snowflakes are and which ones you wind up buying. The only tricky thing with this one is that I noticed that I wanted my board to be darker after I put this on, after I hot glued them on. So I went back and I stained it with the Rust-Oleum decorative glaze in Java. Now, before you hot glue your pieces down, kind of take a look at your board and see if you like it. And if you're gonna write in words, so kind of the reason I wound up staining it darker is I didn't really like the way the words looked that I wrote down. You'll see what I mean a little bit later. So I kind of went back and tried to mute them and make them look kind of like they're faded. They were just a little bit too dark and too rich. So kind of play around with that before you use a Sharpie. I should have done that before, and I knew as like when I was writing with that Sharpie, I knew that I'm like, oh, I should have just made sure I liked it before I committed to a Sharpie, but live and learn. So that's kind of something that I would have done differently, but I still like the way it turned out. I did wind up using one more thing, the same ribbon that I used in the DIY before, and I covered the Merry Christmas. I didn't like the way I wrote it freehand, so I covered it up with that ribbon, and like I said, I went over top with decorative glaze and everything just to mute everything down. So I wrapped the ribbon over top a few times, and I wanted it to kind of look like it was kind of coming off. So I wanted like different levels to it, so that's what I did. So I just used a little bit of Dollar Tree sandpaper, and I just, like I said, sanded down the words a little bit, and then I applied the decorative glaze first with a paper towel, and then I kind of worked it in, and then I used a brush to get it in between. I did get it a little bit on the snowflakes, so I used a baby wipe to remove it. That's why I said it's easier if you do all of these things before you attach your Christmas tree, like your little snowflakes, but I think it turned out really cute regardless, and here is the finished piece. Let me know what you think. So again, another super DIY for number 3. I'm using, again, the spray paint, and I'm using this square plank, and it's from the Dollar Tree, to create my DIY. And I only need 1 coat of this. And then I'm also using these trucks from the Dollar Tree. They're ornament trucks. I'm not using these Christmas lights. My son just put them in my hand, gave them to me, so I put them on the table, so you might see his little hands grabbing them over here. But I remove the ornament and I remove all the little hooks off of the ornament. And then I hot glue it to the bottom of the truck, leaving a little bit of space because I will also be using that same ribbon. So basically I used 1 roll of that ribbon for the entire, like for all 3 DIYs. So it went a long way. And then I used a little bit of a different kind of ribbon for the bow on this as well. And again, like I said, this is a super easy one. And I had a snowflake left over. You can see it in the corner there from the first DIY. So I put that on here as well. And then I distress it with that Rust-Oleum decorative glaze to give it more of a rustic look. And that's basically all there is to it. I do, like I said, wrap at the bottom some of that ribbon and at the top, and then I do like a little bow just using little strips of ribbon. And then I add a little bell, which is from a bell garland from the Dollar Tree that I had left over actually from last year. So after I get everything glued on, I use a pencil this time. I'm a little bit smarter than I was with the previous DIY, and I write in the words Christmas trees, and I put a little arrow. I'm using a red Sharpie to go over top of the Christmas trees wording, and then I'm using a black Sharpie for the arrow. And that's all there's to this one. Another super easy one. These can be tray decor pieces. These can be little accents in your vignettes. It can be anything. They're just cute little Dollar Tree DIYs that are super fun and super easy to make. And I think they turned out great. Look at this guy. Look how cute he is. Let me know which one is your favorite. If you have not subscribed, make sure you hit the big subscribe button. Hit the like. For this gift, I'm using these candles from the Dollar Tree, and I'm removing the plastic around them, and I'm going to be melting them and creating a different kind of candle. I tried 2 different methods for melting them. I tried them on the pot, in a pot on the stove. I didn't like the way it was melting, so then I switched to the oven method, and I love this method. It's no mess, and I don't have to worry about it. I just use a pan, and then I put an aluminum pan in there, put the 2 candles in, set the oven to 350, preheated it to 350. I set the timer for 15 minutes, but it actually wound up being about 27 minutes. So this probably varies depending on your oven. So just make sure you're cautious with that. And then I got these 2 mugs from the Dollar Tree and I poured my wax in there. I took the wick out and then I put it back in. I placed it in and I let it set, and then I cut off the excess once it's set. And I made 3 using these little mugs. They didn't have any more. And then I made 1 using just a different kind of mug from the Dollar Tree. Now, I didn't mention before, I just let them cool and harden at room temperature. I didn't put them in the fridge or anything like that, if you're wondering. And here's what they look like. So that's the different one. And then I have 1 in just like the cellophane gift bag with like a little bit of a ribbon around. I think they're all cute. Whichever way you choose to go, you might want to do 2 as a set or 1. It's up to you.
Well, you guys made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching. This was a really long video, and I appreciate you staying till the very end and watching. You guys are the best. Thank you. Have a great day. Stay safe and Happy New Year, and we'll see you in the new year.